Welcome to this special analysis from HDIN Research. Today, we're scrubbing in to perform a corporate autopsy. Our subject, the materials science giant Dow Inc. We're here to figure out what's really going on behind a very, very shocking headline.
And here it is. This is the smoking gun. Just last year, Dow was swimming in cash, clearing over $1 billion in profit. Then came 2025, and a staggering $2.6 billion loss. That's not a stumble, my friends. That is a full-on, face-first dive into the red. So you're probably asking the same thing we are. How on earth does a $40 billion behemoth, a pillar of the industry, get a report card like this? To figure that out, we need to look past the headlines, examine the evidence, and find out what really happened. Let's begin.
All right, first things first, we have to understand the scene of the crime. What exactly happened to cause this wild swing from making money to, well, losing a ton of it?
Okay, check this out. This is where it gets really interesting. Look at the top line, net sales. They dipped about 7%. Sure, that's not great, but it's hardly a catastrophe, right? But now look at the bottom line. It swings from a $1.1 billion profit to a $2.6 billion loss. So the real mystery is, if their sales didn't completely fall off a cliff, where in the world did all the money go?
So where did the money go? Well, it wasn't a single fatal blow. This was more like a death by 1,000 cuts. A classic case of a perfect storm that just squeezed the life right out of Dow's ability to make a profit. I want you to picture Dow's business as a giant nutcracker. On one side, you have the cost of everything they need to buy. Energy, raw materials, you name it. And those costs were going up, up, up. On the other side, you have what their customers are willing to pay. And with the global economy slowing down, they just couldn't charge as much. So in 2025, those two sides came together and crunch. Dow's profits were the nut that got completely obliterated in the middle. And here's exactly what that squeeze looks like in the numbers. In 2024, for every dollar Dow made in sales, about 89 cents went right back out the door just to cover the costs of making their stuff. Fast forward to 2025, and that number jumps to almost 94 cents. That leaves you with just 6 cents on the dollar to cover R&D, admin, salaries, and profit. There just wasn't enough left in the cookie jar. We found another critical clue, this one hiding out in the warehouses. It took Dow an average of 64 days to sell its products in 2025. That's 4 full days longer than the year before. Now, 4 days might not sound like a lot, but in a business of this scale, it's a massive red flag. It tells you the whole market is flooded. There's way more supply than there is demand. This is the textbook definition of an industry that's scraping along the bottom of a cycle, a really tough place for anyone to turn a profit. So, faced with this brutal reality, what did Dow do? Well, this wasn't just a little spring cleaning. No. They brought in the wrecking ball for a full-scale, strategic demolition. They decided to tear down parts of the old house to rebuild something stronger. And this wasn't a single swing of the hammer either. It was a multi-phase attack. It started with cutting about 1,500 roles globally. Then they moved on to shutting down entire factories, the really expensive, high-cost ones. And as if that wasn't enough, in early 2026, they announced another program to cut about 4,500 more roles. This is some serious house cleaning. And if you look at what's on the chopping block, it's very specific. They're targeting the older, less efficient, energy-guzzling facilities, mostly in Europe. This isn't random. It's a calculated move to get rid of the rustiest, least productive parts of the machine. But here's the thing. You don't tear down a building without a blueprint for what you're going to build next. This demolition is clearing the way for something brand new. This is Dow placing a massive, long-term bet on where they believe the entire industry is going. And the absolute crown jewel of their new blueprint is this project called Path to Zero. Now, this isn't just another factory. This is being built to be the world's first net zero emissions ethylene plant. We are talking about a fundamental shift in how they make their most important products. Now, it's true they did push the project back a couple of years to manage cash while the market is tough. But make no mistake, this is their moonshot. This single project is designed to decarbonize 20% of their entire global ethylene capacity. It is a monumental bet that in the future, being the cleanest operator will also mean being the most profitable operator. And Path to Zero doesn't exist in a bubble. It's the flagship for a whole fleet of aggressive sustainability goals for 2030. Everything from slashing carbon emissions to getting millions of tons of circular and renewable materials into their products every single year. So, what's the ultimate destination for all of this work? Full carbon neutrality across their entire operation, their entire supply chain by 2050. This isn't just about good PR, it's about re engineering the entire company for a low carbon world.
So, after our autopsy, after looking at the ugly 2025 numbers and the drastic restructuring that followed, what's our final verdict on the health of this company? Is this a patient in critical condition, or is this a patient undergoing radical life-saving surgery?
Here's our take. We're not looking at a dying patient. We're looking at a patient who is performing major, painful, but absolutely necessary surgery on itself. Dow is making the tough, calculated decision to sink parts of its own old fleet to make way for a faster, more modern one, built for the future.
Ultimately, that multi-billion-dollar loss and all those painful cuts, that's Dow's investment. That's the price of admission to lead the next generation of the chemical industry. The real nail-biter now is whether they can navigate this current storm while funding this incredibly expensive but absolutely essential transformation.
And that concludes our autopsy. If you want to dive deeper and see all the data, including our 5-year forecast, you can order the full report from our website. You can also just shoot us an email and ask for some free sample pages. Thanks for joining us.